Have you ever considered adding another character or voice to your story to make it more appealing to readers? Well, if you have, you're in luck today, Writer Rebels, because I'm going to discuss my 5 tips on writing dual POV. So sit back, smash that subscribe button, and listen to my tips to make your book doubly as awesome. Hey everybody, it's me, Scarlett Kol, and welcome to my channel. On Thursdays, I bring writing tip videos like these, so if you don't want to miss any of them, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell to get an email whenever I put a new one up, which will be every Thursday. Anyhow, this video is about dual POV. It's inspired by a book that I recently put on pre-order that will be coming out in November called Keeper of Shadows. Keeper of Shadows is a more traditional dual POV in that it goes back and forth between each different character chapter after chapter. So him, her, all the way through. However, I have written other multiple POV books, usually with one focusing on a main character and then just being punctuated by small pieces by another character. One of those examples is Wicked Descent. It was mainly written in Avery's point of view, but I do have a few chapters that are written in another character's point of view, and actually are some of the favorite scenes of some of my readers. I'm also working on a new series that will have a similar sort of feel. It's going to be in the point of view of one main character, but we will have more chapters in another character's point of view as well. But before we get started, one of the things we should probably talk about is why would you consider using dual POV, or if you have multiple characters, multi-POV. Most of my tips will be focused on dual POV as that's what I typically write, but a lot of these tips can be used if you're using 3 or 4 different characters. Some of the reasons why people like to use dual POV is because it lets you see the mind of other characters, especially if you're write typically in first person. If you write in third person, you usually get to move around a little bit more, but not as much, because you do see dual POV in third person as well. However, when you do write first person, you're very limited into what you can write about, because you can only write about the thoughts, feelings, sights, visions, and senses of the person whose head that you're in. So it does limit anything that's happening in, say, another room or another country, another dimension, or how the other characters feel. Everything that you have is filtered through your main character. So just how they perceive that person to be feeling may or may not exactly be how they are indeed feeling. So it can be a little cloudy for your audience. That can be a great benefit because there's a lot of misunderstandings and things like that that you can get into by limiting your character on what they know. However, it does sometimes cause problems with your plot, or just really getting the readers into that situation because they don't see other perspectives. I see this method used a lot in romance novels where we have a couple and you will have one POV obviously of one person in the couple and the other POV will be in the other person. So they can basically both go through their own character arcs, they can be in their own houses, they can have their own thoughts, and the reader still gets to see both sides of that relationship. I've also seen some really cool things that are done with heroes and villains, which are really great. A great multi-POV book that I really like is Vicious by V.E. Schwab. If you want to see some really great character development and multiple POVs, that is one I would definitely recommend picking up. It was really good. But if you do decide to dabble in using 2 or more points of view, there are some things that you should probably take into consideration to make sure that it's working as well as you would like it to. Which leads us to our first tip, which is don't retell the same story. I've seen this in a few books before where there's a dual POV situation, so back and forth, and they're basically retelling the same story from each of the different points of view. I'm sure you've probably seen this before, whereas I believe Twilight did a version of Twilight from Edward's perspective, and Grey, which was 50 Shades of Grey from Christian's perspective, as well as other books out there, but those are separate books. Within a singular piece, you don't want to be rehashing the exact same scene that just happened from one character to the other character. Basically, then you're just telling the exact same story but using 2 different characters. You need to make up your mind and just choose one. If you're going to use dual POV, make sure that you're using it to your advantage and not just boring your reader with the same thing over and over and over again. You also want to make sure that you're moving your story along. So if you have a scene in chemistry class from a male's perspective, and then you have the same scene in chemistry class from the female perspective, the story isn't moving forward. So it's going to bore your reader and they're going to stop turning pages. If you want a dual POV or multi-POV to be successful, make sure that you're moving that plot forward. Which leads us into my tip number 2. Make sure you're planning your key moments between each of your POVs. Sarah Canning calls them cookie moments, and Susan Dennard calls them her candy bar scenes. And I don't really have a name for them yet, but if it was Justin Bieber, he'd probably call them the yummy, yummy scenes. Anyways, these are pivotal scenes in your book that you probably enjoyed writing, spent a lot of time writing, and that your reader is looking forward to. These could be first kisses or intimate moments. These could be fight scenes. These could be big plot twist reveals. Either way, these scenes have a huge amount of impact for your reader. The problem is, if you're using dual POV or multiple POV, you want to make sure that you aren't including these pivotal scenes all in one character's perspective. If, for example, you were doing something like I did with Wicked Descent, where most of the story is in Avery's perspective, then yes, most of those scenes are going to be in her perspective. But if you are doing something that's a little bit more back and forth, you're going to want to make sure that it's balanced. One of the reasons that we would want to use dual POV or multiple POVs is to be able to add depth to your story. You can add depth by seeing different characters' reactions to different things. So by making sure in advance, kind of picture it out in your mind to make sure that those key moments are going to be in different characters' perspectives. Let's take a romance. So if you have kisses, let's say you have 3 kisses in the book, you could put all the 3 kisses in Jim's perspective, or you could make sure that you're including at least 1 kiss in the other character's perspective. The reason for this, it will make it a lot more interesting for your reader because you will get to see how Jim feels about this kiss or how he experiences it, and you will get to see his love's reaction to it. Are they in the same place mentally? How do they experience these things? How does she or he see Jim while they're kissing? If you do want any more tips on kissing, though, I do have a kissing video, which I will include up in the cards. However, hopefully you can understand what I'm trying to say here. You don't want to be, if you're going to add depth to the scene, you might as well go for it and make sure that you're using both POVs to your advantage. Plus, this allows you to reveal different things about each of the characters through these scenes, especially if you do have more than one scene that's kind of similar. This is a really great way and a very easy way to change it up because you're writing it in a completely different voice. Which brings me to my tip number 3. Make sure that your voices are distinct for your main characters. One of the things that a lot of writers already know is that when you're writing things like dialogue, you need to make sure that each character sounds slightly different. People talk differently, people react differently, some people talk in short spurts, some people have long drawn out sentences with big words. It really depends on the character. However, when you are writing in dual or multiple POV, it's not just language that we're concerned with here. Their dialogue is going to be one thing, but they're also going to think and react differently than anybody else. For example, in my book, Keeper of Shadows, Kellen is a bit of a car guy, so he would probably react to something differently than my character, Abby, who's a little bit more of a spoiled kind of princess kind of character. So if, let's say, they were both injured, Kellen might say something like, it hurt like bare skin on a motorcycle muffler, whereas Abby might say something like, it hurt like showing up at prom in the same dress as your best friend. They would have completely different reactions to the same thing. They would explain things differently. They would use their thoughts and they would use their actions differently. Similarly, how you would change up voice and dialogue when you have multiple characters in the same scene. One of the reasons this is important is because you want to make sure your reader is able to figure out which character's head they're in at a particular time. A good test would be if a reader could pick up your book and immediately know after a few sentences which character's head they were in and who they're experiencing things through. One person that I know who is phenomenal at this is the author Katie McGarry. I started reading her books a long time ago and I really, really love them. They're essentially teen romance novels and they are really great. So if you like that sort of thing, you might as well pick them up. But I was fortunate enough to actually get to meet Katie McGarry, and she actually gave me one of the best tips that I ever got about making sure your voices are different. She does very, very well at keeping her voices distinct. And she even said that her copy editors have been able to pick out which character they're dealing with, even if pages have been cut off and all that sort of thing. So that is huge praise when you're trying to keep those things differently, but one writer trying to write two voices. Anyways, she gave me this suggestion, and I was already doing something kind of similar, but I never really thought about it in that way. What she does is she actually has singers attached to each of her POV characters. She writes a lot of straight dual POV characters, so like back and forth. And so she will assign an artist to each of those characters. For instance, for the book Dare You To, she has two characters, Ryan and Beth. Anytime she's writing Ryan scenes, she's listening to Jason Aldean, which translates to a little bit more of that Southern kind of drawl. He's a very like all-American kind of nice guy, so it fits very well. When she's writing the character Beth, who's a little bit more street smart, a little bit more edgy, she listened to Eminem. So even if you can just think of those things in your mind, you know, this like kind of swoony country singer versus something that's a little bit more abrupt like rap from Eminem, you can just imagine how that would impact how she's writing those scenes and how the dialogue and action comes through. Obviously, the stuff with Eminem is going to be a little bit more fast-paced, a little bit more choppy, a little bit more hard, whereas the scenes with Ryan and Jason Aldean will probably be a little lighter, a little more drawn out, a little more poetic. I was already doing something, like I said, similarly to that, because I was writing Keeper of Shadows at that time, and I have basically, for one character, I was listening to these rock songs, and then the other character, I was listening to the same songs, but like the instrumental and orchestral versions of them. So I had kind of separated them that way instead of picking actual artists. But I found that was a great tip if you like listening to music while you edit or while you write. Another thing you can also do is to edit those chapters in order. So skipping the other POV and making sure that it flows all the way through, and then go back to the other POV character and read all of theirs in order as well. Because then that way you're going to make sure that it all kind of stays consistent and you don't really forget about what happened when you're jumping back and forth. And tip number 4, don't overshare. When you have 2 or more POVs, you have the opportunity to show how the character is going to react, what their plans are, and what they think about certain things. And because you have access to the minds of these characters, you can actually put that out on the page. The problem with that is you aren't actually giving the reader any sort of mystery, any sort of excitement to look forward to. Part of the thing that we like when we read stories is trying to figure out how the other character is going to react. It brings emotions out in the reader. So, you know, how did that person like that kiss? Is she going to kiss him back, and why? Or is he going to find out what his best friend's secret is? If you're in the mind of him and the best friend, then you could essentially tell the reader what the secret is, and there's no drama. You can definitely use POVs to your advantage, and you can actually create more tension because the reader knows that you can find out about it, but you can always delay or distract from that. So what do I mean by that? Let's say you have a chapter and it's been a very pivotal scene. We've just found out a huge plot twist. Well, you're in this one character's perspective. You're going, and then you get to the end of your chapter. The reader's going to want to flip the next page and find out what's going on. But you have this opportunity with these other POVs to be able to, delay that out a little bit more. You can switch to another character in another place, in the same time, but with a different thought, and make that reader wait, make them work for it to get to the reaction that's going to come a chapter later, a chapter or 2 later. And the other opportunity is to not tell your reader what's going on, because they know you have access to both characters. if you choose not to go there or end that scene and then come back to it somewhere else, maybe not from that exact same moment, but move forward in time because you have that opportunity to switch back and forth. Or let's say you're in the middle of a scene. Let's say it's a fight scene. So you're halfway through the fight scene. You can always switch to your other POV character and have it from their other perspective. Now you have these things kind of hanging over the reader of what was the resolution for this character and what is the resolution for this character until it all kind of leads together. By using multiple POVs, you're giving yourself a tool to create tension and to keep those readers. So make sure that you're not wasting it by telling them every single detail, because it'll be really, really easy to do. And tip number 5, make sure that you actually need the other POV. Yes, it's great to have another point of view. It's great to be able to see the other reactions. But like I've said from some of my other tips, if you're basically just telling the same story over and over again, or you're laying everything out for the reader, so it's not creating any drama for them, either you probably need to restructure your story, or you need to think about whether or not you really need that POV. Sure, it's nice, it's great, but maybe those additional scenes would be better on your website for readers to check out later. Or maybe you could have less scenes and just punctuate your story with a couple of different things, as opposed to having another point of view that trails all the way through the story. Is the other point of view moving your plot forward? If it's not, then you might have an issue. So before you commit to another POV, because it is a lot more work trying to twine those things together, think to yourself, 1, does it move the plot forward? 2, is my reader going to be invested in this other POV? Because if they're not, you're going to lose them between flipping back and forth, as they want to be sticking with the main character instead of the other POV or POVs that you've added to the book. And 3, am I using the other POV as a way to cheat and not find a better way to put this information out there? Sometimes another POV is just an easy way out. So you need to be honest with yourself as to whether you're just trying to find the easy solution. And I'm not shaming you, I do it all the time. You're trying to find the easy solution instead of finding something else a little bit more creative that will engage your reader and make them want to turn pages, instead of just adding another voice to make things easier for yourself. It can be a really hard decision, and maybe you're going to have to write a couple of those chapters in the other voice to find out whether or not they need to be in there, or to what level the other POV character needs to be there, how often do they need to appear, and all of that kind of thing. All right, so that's my 5 tips on writing dual POV. Hopefully they have helped you out. So to recap, number 1, don't tell the same story from both points of view. Change it up. Number 2, make sure your voices are distinct between characters and we can tell them apart between their thoughts, actions, and dialogue. 3, make sure you're splitting your key scenes between your different POVs so we can experience it through different lenses if you're going to use that tactic. Number 4, make sure that you don't overshare information and use your different POVs to create tension and drama within your story. And number 5, really assess whether or not you need to do this. If you don't, then you're just creating extra work for yourself without any value. All right, so hopefully you enjoyed this video, and if you did, hit that thumbs up button. And if you'd like to hear more from me, hit that subscription bar and the notification bell. I'll be back next Thursday with another video, but if there's anything that you guys would like me to discuss, make sure that you're including it in the comments below, and I will take a look at getting that into my schedule. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all next week. See you later, Writer Rebels.